5 4. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with all of you today as we're talking about matters of war and peace, as we're talking about this new administration that is before us. We're 2 months away from a new administration. We have to remember that President Biden, who's on his way overseas as we speak, well, certainly tomorrow. We still have 2 more months of the Biden administration, but we're also looking at the Trump administration. Elections have consequences. Former President Trump, President-elect Trump, is using this opportunity to bring forth a lot of war hawks. I said, we're going to see what that is going to mean. What will all of that mean? But let's step back because we're still trying to figure out what happened with the Democrats. And we can go back and go forward too. And I can't think of a finer mind with whom to really dissect this than Norman Solomon, co-founder of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, Netroots Action. 2 years ago, he and Jeff Cohen were calling for President Biden to step aside. They said, it's clear. You said you were going to be a transitional president. You are having some challenges. And what we need to do is give someone or someones who can run for office the runway to really kind of to get ready for it, to gear up for a run against Donald Trump, because he's going to be formidable. This is not about liking someone or not liking someone. We're looking at the political realities. Someone who gets 75 million votes in any election is someone you should not ignore. That having been said, here we are. Here we are. He ran for 4 years. Kamala Harris ran for 4 months, and here we are. But many people are saying that even then, there were some critical errors that were made. Critical errors that were made. And guess what? This Democratic autopsy was actually, it was written 8 years ago in 2016, but it's like it was written 8 minutes ago. Because the trends that Netroots foresaw have come into full bloom. You're seeing more and more Black and Latino voters go to the Republican column. And not because, socially, Black and brown people are conservative. There's no question about that. But there was something else that was going on. Pocketbook issues. There's a lot. And so you know what? I always believe in getting people brighter than myself in. So I want to know what happened to them. And you, TJ, you said what happened to the Democrats. You bashed them. No, I did not. Please go to am950radio.com so that you can stream us there. And you can also go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, like and subscribe, and share the show. And please thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. And the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Please become my friend there and go to X at Santita J and the Santita Jackson Show over there on X. But no, I didn't bash anyone. I am Norman Solomon. I am not a robot. And I am a human being who's a grown person. And I'm also grown politically. So I reserve the right. And indeed, it was Teddy Roosevelt. Didn't he say that this dissent is really the highest form of patriotism? My mother, at my age, there is something that I will say, Norman Solomon, something that I will wear that she's going to critique before the sun sets that day. And she will tell me, look, in time you'll see that I'm your best friend, but you only have one mother, okay? And I owe it to you to make you the best that you can be. So I'm going to critique you. I'm going to criticize you because I love you. And if I see something, if I see an error, I want to correct it. So we come not to bury the party, even though the party has a wonderful reputation for burying people who want to save it. Now, we're not the ones to talk to you about this, not Norman Solomon. No. He is from the Jackson campaigns, the Bernie campaigns. These are people who really sought to create real reform in the party and in the country. And these two candidates, really interestingly, over the past 40 years, they were the ones who were attracting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people plus to their events, to their campaign events. If you heard a rumor, I remember going to Sylvia's in Harlem, where I ended up living maybe a couple of years later, with my father when he was campaigning, and he had gone in to get something to eat when he was running. When we came out, all of Lenox Avenue, Sylvia's is on 126th, down to 116th, past 135th. The street was the police had to come out. It was completely packed. And he had to stand on top of a car. Somebody had to get a megaphone and he had to deliver a speech. Bernie Sanders has been in the same position. And yet the Democrats could not find any use for them. And so I think it's important for us when you say, TJ, that we bash the party. No, no, no. We've come to save the party. And that is why we're having this Democratic autopsy today. Because what we want to do is find out where we went wrong. Because if you look back at the map, oh my gosh, Norman Solomon, what did we see? I hope I've laid out enough of a case for you. As you can see, my shoulders are now slumped, although I am keeping hope alive. But this is a lot. Yeah, I mean, when I see Matt Gaetz nominated for Attorney General, Elise Stefanik, UN ambassador, I mean, someone who has no administrative experience, who's being proposed as the Department of Defense chief. Help me. What happened? What did we see come to fruition on Tuesday night?
We saw a rogues gallery. I was going to add a demagogues gallery. This is really predictable. This is the fruition of the vision, if I can use the word vision, of Donald Trump. And we saw it coming. Now it's very close. And as you were saying, Santita, we have not only the possibility, but the responsibility to understand what happened, what went wrong, so we don't yet again enable a kind of repetition compulsion disorder that's been so prevalent at the top of the Democratic Party. You know, we heard quite a lot that Joe Biden had defeated Donald Trump once, so he could defeat Donald Trump again. And 2 years ago, when Root Action launched the Don't Run Joe campaign, we were very clear. We said in 2016, we had Hillary Clinton representing the status quo, and people didn't go for it. And in 2020, Donald Trump represented the status quo, and people didn't go for it. In 2024, if Joe Biden was going to run, he would represent the status quo. So we're saying, let's set aside this myth that Biden would be the one to beat Trump again. And so instead, we had that whole line of analysis, and we put out many news releases, analytical papers. It was all shunted aside because, you know, the people running the party, they always know best. Just ask them. So that's where we were. And it wasn't until the disastrous debate performance at the beginning of the summer, the light bulb went on. The power broker said, Mr. President, it's time for you not to run. And of course, then, as you say, in terms of a runway, very short runway to launch a presidential campaign. So I don't particularly want to fault Kamala Harris. She did a lot of good things in that short period of time. However, she tacked to the right, and she did very much what Chuck Schumer very flippantly said in 2016. It's a notorious quote. It bears repeating. Senator Schumer from New York said, while Hillary Clinton was in the stretch drive to run for president in 2016, don't worry about it. For every blue-collar white voter we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we will pick up 2 moderate suburban voters in the Philadelphia area. How did that work out? Well, that was exactly the strategy of the Kamala Harris campaign this fall, and we see the results.
We're talking with Norman Solomon. I got to, you got to help me with this because I don't understand how it is that they continue to go looking for this voter who left the party and is not coming back, Norman Solomon.
Yeah,
And that you've got so many of these young people who are unregistered to vote. You've got so many poor people who are unregistered to vote. You've got high school seniors who are unregistered to vote. I'm not asking people to have a partisan campaign, but I think a fair number of those kids care about student loans,
yeah,
care about going to college, will care about health care pretty soon.
really.
Why? What is the pushback? I mean, because Bernie Sanders is on point in his critique, and yet Jamie Harrison, and both of them are friends. So I have to fully disclose that.
Mhm.
Jamie Harrison is a South Carolinian just like my dad. That having been said, I absolutely disagree with his position that Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders' critiques of the party and of this campaign, what he termed BS. It
Yeah.
is so insulting. I mean, look at the results. Help me with that. What is Bernie Sanders saying, and why does the power structure disagree with it?
Well, for one thing, I'm thinking of the Unity Reform Commission that was held by the Democratic National Committee after the Hillary Clinton loss, and I went to a couple of those meetings in 2017, and it was run by, Jen O'Malley Dillon. She was the
Mhm.
chair. And because the Bernie forces were so strong at that point, it was divided almost 50%. You know, the Bernie representatives had 40, 45%. The majority were the Clinton people. And Jen O'Malley Dillon, of course, went on to be deputy chief of staff in the Biden White House. Then she went on to be running the campaign of Joe Biden for reelection and then running the campaign of Kamala Harris. And what came up from, and you know Jim Zogby really well, I'm sure. Jim Zogby heroically at those meetings kept proposing that there be financial transparency in the Democratic Party, that the Democratic National Committee open their books. He'd been on the executive committee, as I remember, till he was kicked off by the chair for being too outspoken and honest, frankly. But he had said, I haven't seen a budget. I'm on the executive committee. I'm on the TNC. I don't even see a financial budget. And there was a reason why his proposals in 2017 were voted down by the majority of the DNC's committee, the so-called Unity Reform Commission. And that's because I was gonna say hundreds of thousands. That's wrong. Millions of dollars in consultant fees had been, were being, and would be shoveled to their friends, to their companies, to their consultant firms. And that's about TV contracts. It's about big advertising budgets. It's not really about turnout. It's not about mobilizing and appealing to the base. And so, you know, we flash forward to this year, and there was a little rhetoric about this is a turnout election, but really it was turn away election, turn
Hmm.
away from our own people, our
What
own
do you
base.
mean? Please, because you're sounding Willie Brown, of course, the legendary Willie Brown, former California State Assembly Speaker, former San Francisco mayor. Indeed, the really the most consequential power broker in California state politics for the past 50 years. He did build Kamala Harris's career. Yes, he did do that. He did. He did that for Nancy Pelosi. He did. He did that for Gavin Newsom. He did. He did that for Maxine Waters. He did that for Dianne Feinstein. They all will tell you, may she rest in peace, Senator Feinstein, that the person who blessed me in California state politics was Willie Brown. And not that he's some godfather type, but his connections, his understanding of the landscape, but not just in California, all around the country. And so he's sounding, you all are sounding alike. Let me put it that way. He said, wait, you can't have a middle class campaign when people are starving out here. That's aspirational. You got to talk about groceries.
Yeah. Yeah. And Willie Brown is no leftist. He's just speaking practical terms of getting people elected.
Say that one more time. Willie Brown is what?
He's no leftist.
Thank you.
He is just practical. And that we could use some, in the best sense of the word, pragmatism at the top of the party. But I have to say, these consulting firms that are just in a revolving door of cash from the Democratic National Committee, they never lose an election. It reminds me of these wars, these horrific wars of Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon.
Mm.
They don't lose these wars because they take it all the way to the bank. And I think we have this challenge of what are the priorities of the party, and in many ways, there's more than one party. There's a party of the people who worked their hearts out as volunteers to defeat Donald Trump this fall. And then there's the parties of those who cash the big consultant checks and they land on their feet.
How is it that they continue to land on their feet, but they don't deliver any voters? They're wrong every 2 years, not just every 4 years. They're wrong all the time, but they continue to get rewarded. And one of the complaints that I was hearing leading up to the election, because I do this show and I do Reverend Jackson's Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson, nationally syndicated show on the weekends. But I also have done other shows that are call-in shows. And people would say, no one's knocking on my door.
Yeah.
You know, and I could hear that the callers were Black and some of them were Latino. I said, okay, you can't just assume that these people are going to vote. And you saw this in 2016. You said there's some flashing red lights here.
Yeah.
What did you see?
We saw a campaign in 2016 that took the advice of the consultants of Senator Schumer and others who said votes to be gotten are the white suburbanites, the middle and upper middle class, and just count on the people of color to vote for the Democratic Party nominee, drop by the Black churches right before the election. That's the formula. And it hasn't worked, except that it has kept some people in lucrative power, and sometimes they have a lock on the election. They raise a lot of big checks, and they basically are able to do enough advertising to stay in the Senate, stay in the House, and so forth. It reminds me of the great Howard Stern, the radical, great historian, used to say, when I listen to the news and they talk about the economy, he says, I always think there's not just one economy, there's a lot of different economies. And when we are convinced that somehow there's just one interest, that is delusional. There's the economy for some who are doing real well, and there's a very different economic landscape for others. And I think, in a way, the Democratic Party, in a sense, is almost a misnomer. It's a empty shell. There's really not a lot of there other than a lot of money. There's a building that is actually functioning like a fortress, the Democratic National Committee building. It's really hard to get in, literally and figuratively. There's very little dialogue. And
Would you let people know how hard it is to get to the building and to get in the building?
It is so difficult. I've tried to even reach people to get an answer. They're literally and figuratively not answerable because they're the smart guys and gals, and they know what they're doing. And I'm afraid that, you go back to the Obama years, and this is a pattern. Bill Clinton took care of Bill Clinton when he was president. Barack Obama took care of Barack Obama when he was president. And the Democratic Party lost 1,000 seats in state legislatures during the 8 years of the Obama era. And there is a historic pattern, and I think Joe Biden kept it rolling, that the Democratic National Committee is there to serve at the pleasure and the desires of the guy behind the desk in the Oval Office. And I'm really searching at this very dire time to see, any silver linings in this horrific dark cloud of the impending Trump presidency. One of the very few I can see is that now the Democratic Party nationally has no leader. And there is an opportunity to, at last, develop our own leadership to the very top, and that could start in March of next year with the election for the chair of the Democratic National Committee. After this debacle, Jamie Harrison has said he won't run for reelection, and this is an opportunity. And going back, I think it's been 7 years or so, we almost got a progressive chair. His name was Keith Ellison,
Mm.
and the Clinton people scrambled to find somebody to defeat him, and they came up with Tom Perez, who squeaked by. Well, that is, that's not destiny, it's just prologue. Maybe we can have a different result in March.
Is there a movement afoot?
I think there is, and, I don't know if it's been formally announced, but there's a campaign that is already going through its groundwork because, fortunately, for vice chair, James Ogby's gonna run, and I think that's great. I haven't heard of any candidates for chair, but that's gonna be real important because it's an opening.
Well, we're talking with Norman Solomon, and I've got to talk about your book, War Made Invisible. I have wanted to talk about the human toll of our war machine because now we're watching a widening war. I mean, elections have consequences, everybody. And even though it's very interesting, well, before I get to that, how is it that the Democrats are now known as a war party? I mean, just given with this book that you've written, which is fantastic, fantastic. War made invisible, because we do make war invisible. We do. We don't see the human toll of it. We don't. I think that's what threw us off about Gaza, because for the first time, maybe since Vietnam, we started seeing these bodies, and people said, whoa, wait a minute, what is going on here? The Democrats are now pushing war at every opportunity. What happened? Or what is happening?
There's been an evolution. I think that part of the process, frankly, is that we had an opportunity in 2009 with a new president to fulfill his aspirations that he expressed. He said, "No more dumb wars." That helped Barack Obama be elected. Of course, Chicago person spoke at a rally against the Iraq war that helped to propel him to prominence among people who were sick and tired of the warfare state. And we saw tremendous disappointment on the war front. I mean, Barack Obama did some really good things as president, but his foreign policy and war was not one of them. As a matter of fact, he did a escalation of the war in Afghanistan. He poured tens of thousands more troops in there. He caused drone wars to reach a new level. And I'm old enough to remember when Shirley Chisholm and Ron Dellums and John Conyers spoke for progressives in Congress. And they epitomized an anti-war sensibility that I think reflected, as I understand, and reinforced the anti-war dominant perspective of African Americans in this country. And I do think, and I don't want to hang most of it on him, but I think it was a significant factor that President Obama, who became a war president, really undermined some of that sensibility, and the mainstream of the Democratic Party, the bipartisan, but mostly because of the importance of the presidency in Congress, the leaders, the Chuck Schumers, the Nancy Pelosi's, they were on war train, and they stayed on the war train. And that's been very corrosive. I don't want to imply that the Republican Party is on the peace train, because they're not. And the warfare state is really primarily a bipartisan vehicle.
But what about making war invisible? Because I think that we've done that. And because we've not had the war hit our shores, although different countries are now assuring us If you do not tamp down war, the United States, you're going to feel this. And I don't mean just on your bases around the world. You're going to feel this at home.
That's reality. Well, we know in real life, sooner or later, generally what goes around comes around. But the United States prides itself, and this is a Hillary Clinton innovation of rhetoric. We are the indispensable nation. Madeleine Albright as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, they love to say, we're indispensable. Well, the US is 4% of the world's population. We're mostly indispensable to ourselves, but this is the exceptional nation, we're told. And so what is true for us is not supposed to be true for others and vice versa. And I actually think there's a parallel there with the Israeli response to what happened on October 7th, 2023, because what we need is a single standard of human rights. And it doesn't work when the United States or its designated allies, such as Israel, say, when it's done to us, we're going to do it to you tenfold. We're going to do it to you 50-fold. And you have no right to respond in kind. Well, that just doesn't work. And the invisibility of the warfare that the United States, and in the case of Israel, have been inflicting in Gaza, that really desensitizes Americans. Some folks listening to us might say, oh, well, I've seen footage on TV. I've seen pictures in the paper. I've seen articles. That's not war. That's like the old adage, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. That's a very superficial gloss over what war really is. I mean, remember the old cliche, TV brings war into your living room. I don't think so. Can you think of anything less like being in a war zone, the terror, the horror, being maimed, being terrorized on the one hand, versus scrolling on your iPhone? I mean, it's the conceit that we understand war because of what news media tell us really undermines our capacity as a society to end our wars.
We're talking with the author of War Made Invisible. I urge you to get this book. It will illuminate you about war because Americans, maybe it's the blessing of having two seas, two oceans. I mean, we are so protected, and isolated. But in a world that is shrinking, I'm just wondering if that is going to continue to be the case. Because we're also in a cyber world.
Yeah.
People can get you on the keyboard. I mean, that's how they're killing folks now, right?
Yeah.
It's awful. What do you make of I mean, in 2016 was it inevitable that we would be here? That we would have that we would give rise to a Donald Trump, and that the ground would remain so fertile that he could come back. But he never really left. I'm not going to say he came back. He never left.
Yeah. I don't think it was inevitable, but as you say, he just kept on going. And he had the base. I was asking my colleague at Roots Action, Jeff Cohen, I was working on an article. I said, do you think it's accurate to call this a Donald Trump movement? And he said, absolutely. This is a movement. It's a nativist, homophobic, racist, xenophobic movement, but it is a movement. And it's the worst kind of populism. And it's sad to say, Trump has more of a connection to his base than the Democratic Party leaders nationally have to the party's base.
Well, they've been losing their base. I mean, you foresaw, you said in 2016, you're losing Black people. Maybe not to it, and it's you know what, it's never it never happens in one fell swoop. You're losing Latinos. It happens piece by piece, inch by inch, and that is what we saw that in 2024. And when you have a lot, when you hear a lot of Latino voters and Black voters who went for Trump, they said, I've never voted for a Republican before. Certainly, particularly a lot of Black people. They said, I've never done this, but you know what? He was speaking to me, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
I think he understands me, and I think he's going to do something about my problem. I think he's going to fix it. I didn't say that their assessment was correct, but the Democratic messaging you saw in your Democratic autopsy of 2016, you said your messaging is off. And
Right.
and yet they're assailing Senator Sanders. Who he's been saying that, and when he says it now, the Democratic establishment is still trying to bury him. And I'm like, you just lost.
Yeah.
Do you not get it?
Yeah. Nancy Pelosi's been trashing Bernie Sanders in the last few days for that very reason. And looking ahead, we need a change of direction so desperately. One of the unfortunately not taken paths, I think of that, was it a Robert Frost poem? The road not taken, the path not taken, and that made all the difference, is when we talk about, for instance, inflation, how often did the ticket, the Harris Wells ticket say, yes, there's been an inflation problem. Let's really talk about corporate price gouging across the board. Let's talk about corporate power. Let's talk about the failure of the government to adequately regulate the banks that have continued more subtly to redline people. Let's talk about the people who've been tossed out of their homes because of corporate power and the profit taking, which is so off the map. Let's talk about the enormous cost to the society of more than half of the discretionary budget going to the military. Why don't we, as Americans, as people in this country, collectively force corporations and the super wealthy to pay their fair share? There was just a little bit of that rhetoric from Harris towards the end, but it really wasn't in focus.
It was not in focus. But you said, now it's interesting. Read you whenever I see that you come up on my timeline, I have to stop and download it because you know what? He might get in Facebook jail. Everybody called for peace, and then they put you in jail for 2 weeks with Ukraine. You said, we don't have to have bloodshed. Isn't that what happened to you?
It's happened to people. I have escaped that fate so far.
Oh my gosh! It's terrible. Because I was trying to find it, but you said that his pep talk, his post-election pep talk, was you characterized it as pathetic. Why? What was pathetic about it?
To be really candid, my blood pressure must have just shot up when I watched that 7-minute speech by President Biden in the Rose Garden towards the end of last week. He basically rolled out the blue carpet for Donald Trump at the White House. Here, Kamala Harris, quite correctly, other leading Democrats quite correctly have been saying month after month, Donald Trump is a fascist. Former chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, said Donald Trump is, quote, a fascist to the core, unquote. And yet, in that entire speech, there wasn't even an inkling, not a hint from President Biden after the election results had come in that the country is in peril. And he was already packing his tent and retreating, which is the opposite of what we need. We need some straight talk about we're up against a very, very rough road ahead, and we need to be candid about who and what we're dealing with.
But I can't help but think, oh, yes, I'm about to say it, that he's still burnt about the way he was put out to pasture, taken off the ticket. You don't slip. This is a master politician. You don't slip and call a constituency garbage on election eve.
Yeah.
You don't put on a MAGA hat because people are prompting you to do it. Are you serious right now? There were things that he did that she could never get out of that hole, Norman Solomon. I mean, and look, let's not act as if this is someone who's from the left in the party anyway. This is someone who joined with segregationists and helped them to end busing. Someone who joined with the right wing right after they beat the blankety blank out of Rodney King and went on the floor pushing for an all police officers' Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you doing? So when I saw that, and it was only 7 minutes, and it's not like he lifted up her campaign and good job, nothing like that. Yeah. What was that? What was that?
The best he could have done after she got in the race and he got his little send off at the Democratic convention, he could have just done his job as president and be quiet about the campaign. And as you say, it was a terrible comment that the garbage one, that these people are garbage. I mean, this is just getting back into the playground gutter when it was the last thing that she needed. And I think it speaks to the temptation that people in power have to think it's about them. And sometimes
Mhm.
certainly pundits and journalists and people who care about politics, it's easy to fall into it. It's not about Joe Biden. To me, Joe Biden is no more or less important than someone who helps me when I'm checking out at the grocery store. I mean, we have to not value. I mean, okay, he feels bad. A lot of people feel bad about a lot of things. Uh, and I think the sort of elevation of the personality and the personal struggles and challenges of an individual because they're in power is a way of saying that some people just comparatively don't matter, and that's really backwards.
It is, but that's the way they're functioning. And indeed, you made a tie between president elect. It's hard for me to say it. Sorry, I'm just really trying to be as respectful as I can be. You made a tie between President elect Trump's victory and the Democratic Party elites. Help me with that because it seems like, let's go back a bit. 14 million people voted for, for Joe Biden. Now, mind you, I had problems with the primary because I felt we were denied choice. Anyone who could have conceivably run and put forth the issues. Well, first of all, they canceled the primary. Come on, Norman Solomon.
Really?
Who does it? Democracy? Democracy is at risk, and you do that? Are you serious? So I must tell you, I did not have a good taste about this
Right.
all the while. I said, I'm going to go with it because this is politics. I'm trying to be mature. But Gaza, everything you're doing is it is going against my gut, and it's wrenching. What is the tie between, because it seems that it seems like the elites on the right and the left are having a field day.
Yeah.
You know,
They get to win or lose the election, they get to win.
Either way, the elites of both parties, they won. And then I've got the president welcoming the president elect. I'm not saying he should have been hostile because that would have I would not have countenanced that because that's not right. You have to be respectful. You have to be respectful. But in the moments, in the days leading up to, I did not see enough of not just lifting up Kamala Harris, the party and the party faithful. People out here are devastated by this loss because many people are afraid of what is coming. And when we look at Matt Gaetz as the proposed attorney general, he's now the attorney general designate. You've got someone who just chopped the heads, or she beheaded these progressive educators, the head of Harvard, eventually the president of Columbia fell. Just keep on going. Um, and someone who went and spoke at the Knesset and basically put Israel ahead of our own country. This is very unsettling. But I saw no movement on the Democratic side. And so you lose Dearborn, Michigan. You lose the Arab American community, who are increasingly a very, very important bloc. You're losing these young kids, these young Jewish kids. This push against what's happening in Gaza has been led by young Jewish kids. You've introduced me to a lot of them.
Yeah.
I'm listening to these young people, and I've got nieces and nephews who are not 25. They're like, hands off. How are you going to campaign with Liz Cheney, but you won't touch Bernie Sanders? Norman Solomon.
Can't even allow a elected state representative from Georgia to speak for a few minutes at the Democratic National Convention, and we've seen the speech. It was very mild. She's Palestinian.
And it was going to be. But the victory would have been to get her on the stage.
Yeah.
I mean, everything, sometimes the victories are incremental, everybody. Trust me, I get it. But so I'm trying to find out just, let's go this, because I understand that you're pulling together an autopsy for 2024.
Right.
Kind of give us a bird's eye view into it. I mean, take us from 2016 to now, because it seems to me that the 2016 document was prescient. No one heard you. They might have heard you, but they ignored you. Everything that came to fruition in 2024, you said, these are our problems, everybody.
Yeah.
This is what we lost 900,000 voters in New York State alone. 900,000 fewer Democrats voted. How does that happen?
One of the main reasons that Roots Action organized our Democratic Autopsy, and by the way, it's online at democraticautopsy.org, we did it in large measure because, unlike the tradition when a national party loses a big election, the Democratic Party opted not to do an autopsy. And so the disaster of November 2016 happened. And by the next spring, we saw, hey, this is not going to come from the DNC. We better do it ourselves. And so there were some very cosmetic changes coming out of the Unity Reform Commission that gave a little ground to the Bernie forces. But the corporate consolidation of power just was continuing during the last part of that decade. And we know the saga that when Bernie, for his second time, was part of a very strong campaign movement and was to some degree brought up short when COVID hit in early 2020, but most of all, when Biden called in his chips, the corporate militaristic establishment was really worried in early 2020. And so within a matter of days, at a critical juncture before the Nevada primary, Bernie, I got some long underwear, went to New Hampshire then. And it was great to see Bernie won there in 2020, the first primary of the season. And there was a lot of worry about, could Bernie Sanders, the Democratic Socialist, become the nominee? And so within a matter, as I say, of a couple of days, not just Jim Clyburn, but several of the other power brokers in the party, essentially in terms of visibility, those who were running, basically joined forces and said, we're endorsing Joe Biden. So it was Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, we had the current Secretary of Transportation. They all said, we're folding up our tents, we're endorsing Joe Biden. And I think that was very powerful.
They pushed him out. No, look, let me be very candid with you. When I saw that happen, and I'm not given to a lot of crying, I cried.
Mm.
And I also said, I'm done. No, Bernie was my guy. Now, I mean, look, that's it. I mean, there's some people keeping me in the party, and Bernie Sanders is one of those persons, period. Mm-hmm. And when I said, now, he's the only person, if there is a rumor that Bernie is in town, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe even 100,000 people are going to show up. In 2016, people toggled between Bernie Sanders in open primaries and Donald Trump. They said, either way, one of those two guys is going to fight for us. The most popular elected official in the United States today is still Bernie Sanders. Yeah. Are you serious right now? And Prince Solomon Freeman, I hear you. See, let me explain to you something. He said, Reverend Jesse, with all due respect, we must give way and attention to another opinion, that NAACP and other institutions must as well concede for losing trust of the people. I hope not, because they've done such great work. But Black people, you said, cannot be bait for use by Democrats as their collaterals. I'm hearing you. Norman Solomon, you were very active in the Jackson campaigns. And I think we need to help people understand that the progressive movement was never about a party. I don't think that, well, many people might not have been born, they might not remember, because, we kind of, Reagan has been remade into this kindly figure. He was the Donald Trump of that era. When he was elected, he sent a chill down the spine, down everyone's spines. Am I not correct?
Right.
And no one wanted to touch him because he was so popular. Does that sound familiar? I
Yep.
mean, one of his opening campaign events was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where they killed Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney.
Hmm.
This is 12 years after the murder of Dr. King. This man had the temerity to do that. So that was the only lane that was open for us was the Democratic Party. But you had Ted Kennedy and Vice President Mondale, who was the presumptive nominee, who disrespected the Black vote in particular and progressive Latinos and progressive Jewish people by coming in here and supporting the people who were running against Harold Washington.
Yeah. Yeah. I
You
remember
remember?
that. Stunning.
You were part of all of this. I mean,
Well, I was I was a little foot soldier in the nonviolent huge army that became the Rainbow Coalition campaign.
like
And
I say, yeah. Like I said, part of the campaign. I've known him a long time, so he's being very, very modest. And so I'm saying that for us, this has never been about just a party. This has really been about progressive politics.
absolutely.
And so when I see them push Bernie Sanders off the stage, I said, what do you want? Do you really want me?
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, what am I supposed to do? And now in this consequential election, no one's speaking to our issues. And I can't believe that they didn't have an autopsy after 2016.
Yeah.
Why not? How did they justify that?
Well, I think they didn't want to ask questions that would yield unpleasant answers. Today, you're, I think, absolutely correct. And this is important for us to acknowledge. There are so many people justifiably upset and sometimes terrified by what's
Yes.
coming from the Trump administration. At the same time, we have this opportunity to organize because we must do that. That's the only way we ever get progress.
What do you, I mean, give us some marching orders now. Because you said March is a benchmark. And I've been saying also, because we're still trying to find out what's going to happen with the House of Representatives. We've got, if we don't capture the House now, and everybody, the Democratic horse is the horse we got to ride at this point, you all. I mean, if you want a third party, you got to vote about it and make it happen. And don't let them throw a Jill Stein or block a Cornel West from getting on the ballot because they're playing all those games. But that having been said, we got a House to get in 2 years.
Yeah, I think that's a responsibility still, even though the numbers of open seats are shifting in Democrats' favor. There's a lot of vulnerability in the Senate in 2 years. I just saw news in the last couple of hours. Looks like Republicans do have the House now, but as you say, 2 years from now, it's a real battle, and it's a really important one. My belief is that the strategy to have progressives win momentum and gain the necessary grassroots power over the Democratic Party, it's a terrible electoral option, and all the others are worse. And that is our reality. When a party, the Green Party, spends 40 years and has never come close to electing one member of Congress, I think that tells us something in the real world laboratory. Whereas we have Rashida Tlaib, we have Ilhan Omar, we've had Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, the last two, unfortunately, we have lost. We have some real progressives in Congress, and they've done it through the Democratic Party. If they'd run as a Green Party candidate, they would be asterisks.
Well, because I think that we have to help people to understand how politics really does work.
Yeah.
Number one, Congress is a two-party affair. And if you do not have the support of one party or the other, you are not getting on committees. That's just how it works, everybody. And you must pay your party once you get in. So you're not only raising money for yourself, you have to raise money for the party because you have got to give them a 6-figure check every year. And if you want to sit on these committees, that's the reality of it, y'all. I mean, and on the state level, it might be a five-figure check. But that's the way the system works now. And many of us don't understand that. And so, I mean, just what is the path forward for us? Because I've talked to a good many people, and I have to tell you, I guess I've been taken aback, Norman Solomon, by just the pain that I've heard from people. I mean, they're scared, they're angry, they're scared, they're scared, they're scared, they're angry, they're angry, they're angry, they're scared. Some people are very hopeful. They're like, I finally have someone who has heard me. He's gonna do it for me. But I hear a lot of fear. I hear a lot of fear. And I don't want to leave people with that.
Yeah, I think acknowledging the upcoming catastrophe is part of it, but also that when people work with each other, that prevents us from being overwhelmed by the fear and immobilized. We can't curl up and simply try to look away from the reality. I really believe that while this is a horrific moment, that we can organize and turn this around. As you know, I'm at rootsaction.org. We're working at it. Many other organizations are working at it. And what the right wing wants us to do is to give up, and we've got to do the opposite.
But I mean, now's the time to get to work.
Yeah.
I mean, because now it seems that I'm wondering if they're going to what they're going to do with war because they have nothing but hawks in this administration. Is there anything we can do? Roots Action, Rainbow Push, so many. I mean, Code Pink, the Fellowship of Reconciliation. I mean, we have to come together out here. But help me to understand what can we do because many people, they hear about Trump having a mandate, and when you hear that, it can be intimidating
Yeah.
to the electorate. But I said, wait a minute. Everyone references Reverend Jackson's run for the presidency. He did it under Reagan, and that was big. And Bernie has stepped into legend in the face of growing Trumpism.
Right.
So every action merits an equal and opposite reaction. What should we be doing now?
On that note, I think one aspect is that we need to insist that the Democrats in the House and the Senate, Democratic governors, people in the state legislatures around the country who are Democrats, that they will not give 1 inch. One of the characteristics of fascism is that the goalposts keep moving, and something that's outrageous and people say is absolutely unacceptable becomes normalized. And we've got to ourselves, our organizations, and insist that as constituents, we will tell elected officials, we are demanding that you not give an inch to the MAGA agenda. Do not give an inch to Project 2025. And we're keeping score. And if Democrats in Congress are not going to fight tooth and nail against this agenda and articulate reasons for fighting tooth and nail, we're taking a look at a primary challenge in 2026.
To Democratic incumbents.
If they do not fight these fascistic Republicans, they deserve to be primaried from the left.
I absolutely agree with you because we have the power.
We do.
And I think we have far more power. Just very quickly, if you can tell us about the power that we have, because I think we have much more power than we even know.
Absolutely. I mean, every member of Congress has offices in communities that they are supposed to represent. We can meet with these people. If we don't get satisfaction, we can get out the picket signs. We can raise hell nonviolently and militantly and say, you are not fulfilling your responsibilities. We're going to challenge you, and we intend to get you out of there.
Mm-hmm. We can do that. And you should do that. It's your patriotic duty. We've got widening wars, and you have countries that we used to be able to, dismiss. You can't dismiss Iran anymore. You really can't. You can't dismiss South Africa. You can't dismiss India. You can't dismiss 96% of the world, everybody. We're only 4.5%. It's no longer us versus the world. It's us and the world. It really is all of us. And so we have an obligation to get to work. Roots Action, everybody, get the book, War Made Invisible. I want you to come back and talk about that because I don't think we talk enough about the human toll of our war machine on the world.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that because we now have an increasing number of hawks who are going to populate because, look, with the House and the Senate, basically Trump is naming his cabinet. They're not going to be voted down. They're not. But what you can do is hold them accountable and start primarying people. Yeah, no money. You don't need any money. Okay, Stacey Abrams said, "Yeah, I'm broke. So what? Get out here and do it, and get involved in Roots Action." I misspoke earlier. It's Roots Action. I don't know. I want to call you Net Roots, but it's Roots Action. It's Roots Action. They're doing such great work. And is it democraticautopsy.org?
That's right.
Democraticautopsy.org. When you read the 2016 report, you're going to say, this wasn't written 8 years ago. It was written 8 minutes ago. This is what happened. But, the good news is the illness has been diagnosed. Now we can get the medicine. How about that? Norman Solomon, I thank you for all of your work. Thank you for all of the work and thank you for all that you're doing. Got to get you back to talk about War Made Invisible because we need to talk about that next. Because I'm wondering if the new administration, if they have it seems like there are a lot of people who have a real thirst for war. And we need to know what that's going to cost us.
That's right. Santita Jackson, thank you for all you do on this program and so much else.
You are just a gem. I just love you, Norman Solomon. May God bless you real good. And everybody, thank you. Shalom, Robert. That's right. Then Robert said, primary, baby, primary. Bam. I think you started something, and that's a good thing. Put that up. That's your next piece. Talk about primaries.
Primary can be a verb, yeah.
Oh, come on now. That's it. We got to make that happen. Sending everybody so much love. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I am Santita Jackson. Norman Solomon. Get the book, War Made Invisible. Support the organization Roots Action. Roots Action, everybody. They deserve your support. They're doing work for all of us. May God bless you real good. Have a great one.